What are you, a member of the
world? It is April 8th.
The rowing team.
Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, April 8th. Trying so hard to start at the top. Hello, Hockey World. It's Monday, April 8th, 2019.
He looks like a member of the Four Freshmen. I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Peter Tessier.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I am Eklund, wearing the Outdoor Series Vancouver Canucks jersey for next year. And you're watching the Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This podcast comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we are in the playoffs, folks. And we've made it. We made it through. We made it through this weekend. It was the most surprising thing this weekend for anybody. Anybody have any things that really shocked them?
Yeah, the fact that 3 coaches were fired on Sunday.
I wasn't shocked at that. I mean, I actually texted Mike and told him I thought Bugner would be the first guy fired. Now, I didn't know what was coming, but I knew he'd be the first fired because I would have fired him at the All-Star break.
Well, and there may be more to come. There's a lot of speculation out there that Boudreau is going to get fired in Minnesota.
Yeah.
There is speculation on that. I don't know if that's the case, but it's definitely out there. I think my iced tea is leaking from the bottom of my thing. It's so funny. I was just realizing.
The thing about
sorry, I apologize. Just dripping all over.
Your staff should check before you get on.
I know there's a lot of teams out there where we wonder what's the status with what they're doing as an organization. And I think the one that flies under the radar the most is the Wild. There's a lot of questions for the Wild, given their roster and the fact that they, considering that they have a new GM who, relatively new now, who kept the former coach, and now they missed the playoffs. And yes, they had injuries, but these are the kinds of things that all add up into, and they had injuries last year in the playoffs, and they all add up into things that make GMs do quirky things. And now I'm starting to wonder, are they sort of a team that's sitting there waiting to do something, and they're going to spring some major moves on us this offseason? And I think it's a real possibility, but not a lot of people are talking about it. Yeah, no,
you got to check out Dan. Some of Dan Wallace's stuff that he's doing on the on Hockey Buzz, the Wild, is really good. His stuff last year was just was outstanding too. Just looking at the offseason and how things were going, and he, his belief that Boudreau was definitely an issue, and I that with this particular group of players that it just wasn't going to go any further. I kind of, I know Russ had high hopes for Minnesota, but this. I think it definitely is time for a change there. And the whole season can sort of be summed up into like the Niederreiter trade, like that trade, just like, which was, and then Niederreiter, everybody's like, what, they got the better end of that trade, in Carolina for sure. And obviously Niederreiter's playing well there, but people have to remember Niederreiter has been given up on by more than a few teams. Like it's not like this is like Minnesota, like he was drafted by Minnesota and they gave up on him. He's been around, and he found his right spot for sure, and he's thriving in Carolina. But
yes and no, Ak. You got to remember, it was Garth Snow that gave up on him and got Cal Clutterbuck for him. So I honestly think that Minnesota made out on that deal, and then they signed him to a long-term extension, and he wasn't having a good year, and he wasn't getting along with the coach, so they made the deal for Victor Rask. But just to go to because Russ will talk about Minnesota here, I think the deals that they made at the end of the year were good, the Donato deal and the Kevin Fiala deal, but those are deals for rebuilding, reorganizing teams. Those are not deals that were conducive to a team making the playoffs and making a run. And I don't know whether Fenton is going to, go another year with Boudreau when that team seems to be sort of in the mode of a retool.
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't have pushed all the chips to the center without Dumba. That would have been silly, and without Koivu. So the moves he made did keep him in it for a little while, and that's all they could have really done. Either they were going to make it by some great surge, or the injuries were too much. So the injuries are too much. But still, if you look at the team and you look what's coming, they'll probably retool a little bit more and get another player out of there. Maybe Spurgeon will be the guy this time.
Yeah.
But all in all, they still are in pretty good shape to make the playoffs next year. It's not like this team is like steps behind or years out, or
Right.
no, they still have these guys. They did lock up Stahl, who started to come on again at the end.
Yep.
You know what? I still think next year could be good for them. But
yeah,
Peter makes a good point. Last couple of years, they've had some injuries. I'll tell you what really, if I were them, I would go heavy into trying to get Kirill Kaprizov over here. If they get Kaprizov over here, that's a game changer.
Yeah, he's their one really shining prospect out there that everybody talks about. Right? And he's. I mean, they I talked to one person who said he was, I know you just, and I said, well, my guy, Russ disagrees with this, but he said that he was their only real shining prospect out there. But he is definitely a big time game changer, as you said.
And he had 30 goals in 57 games this year. I mean, he scored goals.
I mean, look at the Wild. The Wild's issue has been that they were a team that could always make the playoffs. Pretty much, they were good enough to make the playoffs in a tough conference, but they couldn't get over the top. Right? They were stuck, and the teams hit their top. At different points. Quite often we always expect that top to be the Stanley Cup, but it's usually not. It's usually somewhere before the Stanley Cup. It's usually we're a playoff team, but we can't get through the first round, or we're a playoff team, we can't get through the second round, or we can't make the playoffs at all. Or whatever it is. But the Wild had many years, and injuries when the Wild are synonymous. I mean, that this year they've had injuries, but every year they've had injuries. I mean, that is the Wild story.
Now, to prove to people, sorry, Mike, that they have more than one guy besides Philip Johansson, the defenseman, who's still probably 2 years away, and Ivan Lodnia is probably still 2 years away. Lodnia had 45 points in 41 games, and had 11 points in 7 playoff games. So I'm telling you, he's an excellent prospect. So look, they're not loaded. They're still towards the bottom for prospects, but they still have some guys coming.
So I wanted to get into today because we are definitely going to talk about the playoffs for sure. And but for all the people whose seasons are over, I thought we should spend a little bit of a day talking about those teams for a second. And before we get our playoff previews, which will be the next 2 days, next 3 probably.
So we're going to talk about the losers on this show, Ike? I thought we agreed we'd never talk about losers.
I wanted to frame it because Russ sent a text out this morning that I know you're just trying to rile me up, but
they're future champions.
Yeah. So, we talked about, obviously Joel Quenneville has signed with the Florida Panthers. If unless you're living under a rock, you know that by now. But if you are living under a rock, come out from that rock. He has signed with the Florida Panthers. Russ said, the Florida is, going. The quote was here.
Quote.
That basically something along the lines of. He wants a team. Quenneville wants a team closer to making the Cup, and he knew he wasn't going to Philly. All right, implying that the Florida Panthers are a team closer to winning the Stanley Cup than the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yes.
I mean, if that to me, and I hate more than anything you putting me in this position, Mr. Cohen, because
I didn't do anything.
I don't want to be defending the Flyers. I don't like defending the Flyers all the time. So what I decided to do, instead of saying that I think the Flyers are well better along the way to winning a Stanley Cup than Florida is, as of now, not saying that Florida can't go out and get Bobrovsky and Panarin, and then we can have this discussion again. But now, where we sit right now, yes, the Flyers have way more depth and way more scoring.
No. See,
I mean, let's forget about the Flyers for a second, please, because I don't want to get into the discussion. I'm sorry. Too early.
Let me talk about the Panthers, because my main criticism of the Panthers, as you know, when we talked about it during the regular season preview, was the fact that their goaltending was. You couldn't depend on the health of Roberto Luongo, who's 39 years old, to be able to carry them to the playoffs. And if you had to rely on James Reimer, you were screwed. And that's what ended up happening. Luongo is declining. Reimer is not a good pseudo number 1. So that's the problem. Now, Quenneville goes in there, and look what he has to work with: Barkov, Trocheck, Huberdeau. They probably no. Well, they can get a goaltender.
Can they?
If they can get a goaltender.
They could. If they do.
No, they will. I mean, they will get a goalie.
They will get a goalie, but will they get? I mean, Bob's a great goalie, Bobrovsky's a great goalie. Then that's a game changer. Panarin's a game changer.
What if they get Corey Crawford? Like, we don't know who they're going to go after.
Right.
Corey Crawford, okay, yes, but I
mean, and he's only got 1 year left in his contract, and you have to admit that Quenneville is going to have, and Florida, if they didn't already have an inside track on Panarin, now that Quenneville's there, who coached Panarin in Chicago, that gives you even more evidence that they're going to go after, and they probably will get Panarin.
Yeah,
I will also say this, Mike. So Florida has Alexei Heponiemi, who for Karpat has 46 points in 50 games and 16 goals. He's probably coming over this year. So that's one guy. Owen Tippett, who has an NHL shot already and is big and strong and fast, will come and play for the Florida Panthers this year as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
They're going to get a goalie. There's no one close on the Flyers to Barkov, not even close, not even in the same solar system. Even Florida's defense is further along right now, and it's not great, but it's further along than the Flyers' defense. The Flyers.
That I want to hear. I want to hear that.
If you want to match it up, go ahead. You're going to lose the matchup.
Ekblad, Matheson, Yandel.
All right. Ekblad, of course. Ekblad, we give you. Ekblad, Provorov. Ekblad's better than Provorov, no question about it. Those are the two best defensemen on each team.
Okay.
Ekblad, Provorov. Okay, so I give that to Ekblad. But then after that, let's go through.
Ekblad, Matheson, Yandel, Pizik.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 4 right there.
You're going to be matching up Robert Haig against Pizik. You're going to lose that matchup.
What about Sanheim? What about
Sanheim? Sure. I'll tell you what. I'll give you Sanheim over Pizik, but you're going to lose a lot of the other matchups. Even Gostisbehere is going to lose out to Yandel based on the year.
Based on this year. But if you were to sit there and say that, the Flyers were to offer Gostisbehere for Yandel in a trade, I think Florida would make that deal.
Well, Yandel's older.
Right.
Yandel's more expensive.
That's part of what we're talking about here. We're talking about, Gostisbehere had a terrible year, which all young defensemen tend to have. There tends to be a year, if you go through history, there tends to be a year where young defensemen Ekblad had it. They fall off the map for a bit. But then, Gostisbehere was terrible. No questions asked. Awful. But there's at the same time, there's no thinking that he's going to be awful for the rest of his NHL career.
But let's go with this. Keith Yandel had 62 points this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shane Gostisbehere, his best year was 65. He's not ever gotten close to that ever since. This is a typical year for Keith Yandel, somewhere between 50 and 65 points.
I heard somebody describe today, before Quenneville was announced as the Panthers coach, what the most attractive job out there was of the teams that were looking for coaches, and Florida was up there. And you had to put
good. They're very good.
You had to throw Edmonton in there for the fact that McDavid and having to work with McDavid and Draisaitl, but that organization is such a tire fire that I would steer clear of that. But I mean, okay, he gets a 5-year deal, making $6 million a year. They've got a ton of cap space. They've got core players that are young and good. Now, there's going to need to be some changes, but honestly, I think that Florida, if they make the right moves in the summer, are going to challenge Boston, Toronto, Tampa.
There's no question
at the top of the Atlantic Division.
There's no question that Florida is now assuming they get. I really do believe very strongly that they will get Panarin. Whether they get Bobrovsky or not is another question, right? But I do think that they're going to get Panarin. And if they get Panarin, then there are 4 teams to talk about in that division now. And there's no question about it. There, and if not 5, because Montreal's got to be put in there as well. So to me, this is that division suddenly is not going to be the division that only sends 3 teams to the playoffs. They're not. That division is going to be much better. So, the decision of Quenneville going to Florida was bad news for Mark Bergevin. It definitely was bad news for a lot of people in that division. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to get into all of the teams that didn't make the playoffs and which one of those teams is closest to winning a Stanley Cup based on what Russ said. This morning he said Florida is closer to the Flyers. I don't buy that for a second, but there's other teams. There's other teams, right? There's other teams out there that didn't make the playoffs, and who among the teams that didn't make the playoffs is closest to not just winning, but closest to winning a Stanley Cup? That's the question. Not just making the playoffs, but who among the teams can you see being the closest who could get there? And What's interesting when I went through this list is I think more than ever before that I can remember at least, there's more teams trending forward than backwards. There's usually a good 4 or 5 teams, and some of the teams that are trending backwards are arguably in the playoffs.
I think you're right about that. I think the reason is because more teams now with a salary cap have been willing to pull the plug and go for that, where in the past they would have just tried to buy their way out of it.
Yeah. See, it's difficult. It's a really difficult question, Nick, because first of all, you have to factor in a team winning the lottery and getting a guy like Jack Hughes as a piece.
Right.
So if somebody like
the right team, if Jack Hughes goes to Florida, then that changes things. Jack Hughes goes to the Flyers, that changes things. If Jack Hughes goes to Detroit. But yeah, if he goes to Vancouver along with his brother and Besser and Pettersson, then you could say, they get a goaltender, they get a couple defensemen, and they're on the right track. So I mean, it's really tough because, and also free agency, you don't know what these teams are going to be able to sign or re-sign. Right. Like I'll give you an example. Buffalo is going backwards right now, and if they don't sign Jeff Skinner, they're in a hole that I don't know how Jason Botterill digs his way out of. And
it's a lateral thing. They'll just next year will be another year like it was this year, 2 years ago without Skinner. That's what.
And I was at the presser yesterday in Buffalo, and I have to tell you that Botterill was very limited in terms of what information he would give regarding like what type of coach he was looking for, what the qualities of the coach, and the timetable he was going to hire the coach, which tells me that this was not his move. I think he wanted to keep Housley. I think he was nudged by ownership to fire Housley because of the negative repercussions in the fan base and in the media. I know like the Buffalo radio station here is like banging away at fire Housley, fire Housley, fire Housley. And that's going to affect the season tickets with the Sabres, and they had to make the move. But I think that the crosshairs are on Botterill right now. And what, is he going to have another year? He can't turn this thing around in a year. All he has to do is show progress. But I don't know whether he can show progress in just a year.
Well, I'm gonna make it real easy from my perspective. I looked over the West. Nobody in the West is close. Nobody. Okay. They haven't made the playoffs.
So you're going with Florida then, basically. That's the team you think?
Well, that's one of the teams. I'm going to also say these are non-playoff teams, right? So
right, non-playoff teams that are closest to winning a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, actually, you know what? Really, just Florida. Yeah, that's all I'm doing.
When you say,
that's it.
But like some of these, like I think.
Well, I know
by the time the Florida Panthers win the Stanley Cup. To me, the other thing you have to look at with this thing is you have to look at these teams are a good 3 years away from winning a Stanley Cup at the best case scenario.
Russ won't say it, but I will, based on the cap space that they have, based on the willingness to spend money and the prospects that they've started to put together. I think the Rangers, because now the question is whether Lundqvist will be spry enough in his late 30s when they are competitive to be able to be the goaltender, or whether it be Georgiev or one of their other prospect goaltenders. But I think that they've shed a lot of bad salaries, and if they go out and they sign Carlson, or if they get in on Panarin, they could turn it around fairly quickly.
Well, they would have to do 3 things. They would have to sign Carlson and Panarin, and they would have to re-sign Kreider. To me, it's too much to think that all those things will happen, or even 2 of those things will happen. Yeah. So that's why I don't think so.
Yeah. What do you think, Peter? Where are you with these?
Sorry, I had to take a time out and answer an email there.
That's
what was the question?
What non-playoff team now is the closest to winning a Stanley Cup?
Man, that's a tough one.
I know it is.
I asked it.
I'll give you one in the West that I think. Yeah. I'll give you one in the West that Russ will probably bristle at. I think the Chicago Blackhawks.
I think the Blackhawks too. I agree with you. No, I do agree with you. I think in the West, I think the Blackhawks and you guys will laugh, but the Oilers are the closest 2 teams to winning.
Oilers.
Not a chance in friggin' hell.
Come on.
End the show.
Let's keep in reality.
Thanks, people. Thanks for tuning in.
Yeah. By the way, we haven't heard the extent of. I mean, it wasn't a broken leg, but the extent.
Ryan Rashog tweeted out that the MRI results are believed to be not as serious as believed.
Well, that's good. That's good because he thought he broke his leg, and the speed that he went into the
post at 42 miles an hour.
Yeah. No, kilometers.
Kilometers. So 37. Whatever.
I'll make my arguments for.
Yes, please do. We'll all sit back and listen.
For Chicago, I'm going to go with Chicago, Mike. Why don't you start with Chicago? Start with Chicago for a second.
Well,
why do you think that?
With Chicago, first of all, you've got Kane and Taves. They're still in their prime. I think that the additions of Strome and the drafting of DeBrincat, or they have the semblance of a young core. As Russ has talked about, they have young defensemen coming, Yokoharu, Boquist. Gustafsson had a good year in terms of an offensive year, but he's not a two-way defenseman. The problem is the albatross contracts of Keith and Seabrook. Now, I think that to pay Strome and DeBrincat, they're probably going to move Brandon Saad. They may move Anisimov. So there's, and they could move Corey Crawford. Corey Crawford to Florida makes a lot of sense because he's got
Corey Crawford a few times.
Right, he's got a year left in his contract. The problem is he's so injury prone. I think they're going to have to get themselves a future goaltender. But it's not compared to some other teams like Detroit or Buffalo. Their upgrades to put them back into contender status are not like out of the realm of possibility. It's going to take work, but I think as long as you have Kane and Taves there being the 1-2 punch, and they're in their early 30s, so they're not over the hill, I think you have to factor them in as a potential contender.
I mean, I can tell you one free agent Chicago could pick up. Kyle Calder is only 40 years old.
Oh, Jesus. How old is Mark Bell?
And then we go to Peter after this. So my feeling on Chicago, and then I'll give my feeling on Edmonton. But my feeling on Chicago is that to win a Stanley Cup, you really need a combination of things. And one of the big things you need are good, experienced veterans around. Like you need that going on, and Chicago has that, of course, in spades. I mean, you can look at those contracts like albatrosses, but that's also how San Jose looked at Marlowe and Thornton at one point. Before they went to a Stanley Cup final. You need those kind of players around. And having experienced players like that, along with good young players, is the formula to winning a Stanley Cup. It always has been. And there aren't that many teams, when we look at these teams that are out of the playoffs, that have those experienced players. The other one, the Flyers have players like that too. Now, the Flyers, I don't think, are close to winning a cup because I think you need a couple more years with Carter Hart to get going. You need the goaltending, but that's one of the reasons I put.
That's all they need is goaltending.
Well, that's their main thing, because when they had good goaltending, they were the 5th best team in the NHL for
okay. All right,
come on.
That was.
Why do you ignore this? Like, why do you ignore the fact that they were that?
I'll tell you why. Okay, you want to know the reason? I'll give you the scenario.
One day I will have my comeuppance. I don't want to defend the Flyers.
Here is the scenario.
But you keep doing it.
When the Blues,
you guys are being ridiculous.
No, we're not. When the Blues were the worst team in the league, they still had a good defense. They needed a goalie. When they got a good goalie, they rocketed to the top and stayed there. Yeah. When the Flyers had a bad defense and needed a goalie, they got a good goalie. They went as far as that goalie could take them, and then they died. And that's exactly what would happen next year if you had the same goalie and the same defense. And they might win 1 or 2 more.
The Blues defense is way more.
Don't rule out the Berube then had about a month and a bit to work with the team,
right,
as well, right, and yeah.
And they play like crap in December, and then they turned it around when they called up Bennington in January.
The team.
Go ahead, Peter. Please.
The team that is closest to winning the Stanley Cup, that's not in the playoffs right now, is the one that has the most manageable flaws in its roster.
Exactly.
That is the team. So now that's how you look at it that way. And right now, so Florida did one by getting Quenneville, but it still has flaws. Look at all. So let's go through them. LA off the list. Too many.
Slow, old.
I mean, you have to list them off. Okay, let's go through the Pacific then. Arizona.
Even if they got Hughes, they still have other problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Vancouver.
I think they're in the upper half.
Coach
Goaltending,
and
defense.
roster isn't complete. No, isn't close to complete.
Right.
Okay. Who else do we got in the West?
Anaheim.
Aging everything. So they're not even close.
In cap jail. Yeah.
Okay. So then we got Minnesota.
Mhm.
I think their problem is that their core group is aging. Parise and Suter, and the young guys that we've talked about for a few years, and then they may come around. But the guys Eriksson, Ek, Greenway, Cunnin, they need to step up and be better players. And Russ is right. If they get Kaprizov, he would be the biggest Russian ad since Panarin came over.
But that's a big if, and that's why I didn't put him on the list.
Chicago, we've already discussed, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Already discussed. Who else is there then?
Edmonton.
See, this is the thing.
We're going to let Ek talk about Edmonton. We didn't let him do that.
Okay, go ahead.
To me, I disagree with your premise, Peter, even though I like it. I like your premise a lot. I disagree with it, and this is why. And this is my example, the Vegas Golden Knights. Okay, like they have huge holes, like and had huge holes last year. Like they had their best defender was like the 5th or 6th best defender on most teams. They had one line, and yet they managed to go to the Stanley Cup final. I think there's so much more to it to winning a Stanley Cup than filling those holes. It comes down to like having certain kinds of special players in certain special positions.
Yeah, but
like Vegas had Marc-Andre Fleury.
But we can't worry about special players and special positions because those arrive as they arrive.
Because but
you can't build a team to be a Stanley Cup contender and say, well, who are my special players?
No, you can't. But if you have those special players, aka McDavid and Draisaitl,
right,
you can build it.
They're not special. They're the type of guys you need. You need people away from them who are special, who you can slot in.
But
the problem is that you got the problem is.
Stop.
Oh, wait, come on, jeez.
I didn't finish.
Okay,
and then you can go and tear me apart. You will.
Right now, the chat room agrees with that, so let him finish.
Okay.
You have
the
those
chat
players.
room's generally drunk at 8 a.m.
What Edmonton needs right now is a good friggin' GM. I mean, they need somebody who can go out and fill in the places around McDavid and Draisaitl because there's tons of free agents out there. There's tons of UFAs. The kind of guys that got put onto Vegas, the kind of guys that end up on Seattle are out there. We talked about the one we talked about constantly this past year in Chason, in Ottawa. That Russ and I talked about him a lot. He turned out to be the perfect. Those kind of players exist. You got the right GM because you can't get a Draisaitl and a McDavid. You're right, but they have them. They have them already. So there's other players you can find if they get the right players in.
But the problem is that you can't get the 8 to 10 players that you need to surround Draisaitl, McDavid, Darnell Nurse, Clefbaum, because you don't have the cap space. They're in cap jail, and not because of Draisaitl and McDavid. That's $20 million. But yeah, how are you going to get rid of Milan Lucic? How are you going to get rid of Chris Russell? You've got so much dead money there. It's going to take an investment by Daryl Cates to buy them out or to put them on their version of Robidas Island, and they're not going to do it. So they're a cluster F. That's what they are.
Why wouldn't they do that?
Because
I don't think why wouldn't they do it? Because they need someone who can change the total embedded way of thinking within that organization and stand up to all those personalities in there.
Why wouldn't they do it? Because it's the right.
You're absolutely right.
Why wouldn't they do it? Because it's the right thing to do, and that organization has not done the right thing to do in years.
It's just defeatist.
The thing here is what the Leafs did. Let's just look at the Leafs. Because there was there was years ago people were saying who's going to get it right first. Actually, I was looking for an old blog the other day, and I wrote something in the offseason about who gets it right first, the Leafs or the Oilers. Well, and here's the difference. You're walking down the hallways in TNSE, and you got some crazy idea, and you want to bring something up. And what do you see? You see you got to go in and talk to Shanahan and Lamoriello. You got to stare down those two.
Right.
I'll stare down Chiarelli any day of the week. Kevin Allo, I'll Jedi mind trick. You don't even need to be a Jedi to fool him. Like, I mean, it's about capability and ability, and the Oilers have none of that. They need people who will adhere to the plan and know and have some level of success in their backgrounds away from, oh, I was part of a Stanley Cup winning team.
Exactly.
And their defense.
The Oilers don't have that.
Their defense is horrible. No question about it. Their defense is terrible. Their goaltending, they need to get, PRV has to turn into something or not. There's certain things there's decisions they have to make.
There are
either move PRV or he has to develop.
Oh, Puljujärvi. Okay.
Yeah, PRV.
No, I thought you were talking about Magnus PRV because he used to be with Edmonton, but no, and that's going to be difficult with the double hip surgery. But the problem is that the incompetence is continued by spending $4.5 million on an average goaltender in Mikko Koskinen. You got out from underneath a Cam Talbot contract. He was an expiring free agent, and you spent money on a guy who didn't prove anything. So
I do have to wonder what's the next team, because for a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 12 or 13 years. He's certainly things from his perspective. Things are looking up in Edmonton, and I don't see how that's.
They did make the playoffs years ago. But anyway, besides that,
12 or 13 years they haven't.
12 or 13 years they haven't. No, and no, Peter is dead on right. I'm glad it all comes down to a general manager, and hiring a general manager that has nothing to do with them is the other. Nothing to do with that whole situation.
I agree.
Bob Nicholson, okay.
But also,
this whole thing is not an idiot, okay. And,
so,
and no. As well.
Look at the marriage that owns the Maple Leafs. Look at that marriage. They actually battle each other in broadcast rights. Yep. You need someone at the top of the heap who will manage that relationship, and keep that separate from the operations of the club.
Yeah. Now
that's Shanahan.
Team,
and the Oilers don't have it.
I agree.
There are examples in the league like Shanahan where team presidents work. There are examples. I mean, I don't think you can consider what Bob Nicholson has done in Edmonton a success, because I think you still have the meddlesome nature of the alumni of the Edmonton Oilers and the owner who's a super fan. And I think that's a similar thing that's going on in Buffalo, because you've got Terry Pegula. There is no president of hockey operations. You've got Terry Pegula and Kim Pegula having a direct access to Jason Botterill, and apparently they talk to him every day. So honestly, that is not a recipe for success. You need to have a buffer between ownership and management and a team president, but you have to have the right guy to do the job. Nicholson has not been the right guy yet in Edmonton, but I think Shanahan has in Toronto.
Here's the thing that I've heard. Okay, then we'll move on from Edmonton. That Nicholson. When you talk to people about that GM job, and I've talked to a lot. I talked to 4 or 5 people who don't want it, or people who don't, people. And the reason that they don't want it is the feeling is that Nicholson, like, for all that Edmonton's all Edmonton all the time. Nicholson's viewed as all Canada all the time. Like, he's the Canadian guy. So if you're like, there's a lot of American possible GMs out there who aren't even, who think they'll never get hired in Edmonton because Nicholson and it's Edmonton and it's Nicholson, and that's like. And that, but he's saying that, I have heard that Bob Nicholson is going to be interviewing like 10 to 15 people, like really going hard for this thing. And whether or not that ends up with somebody off the record, I mean, out of the realm, or whether that ends up with who they really want, which seems to be McCrimmon, I don't know. And if McCrimmon's the guy to pull it off, I don't know. But they need a special individual who can not just manage the cap, not just bring in good players, but manage the situation, like you're saying. And and there are people like that out there, I do believe. And I think Nicholson, for the first time, from what I gather, kind of really gets that. That's what's happening. That has to happen. And I mean, I'm going to give him one more shot here. Nicholson, I do agree that hasn't done well so far, but I think that if he can turn this around, get away from Chiarelli, make this is his whole thing now. We'll see, right?
Yeah, I mean, but boy, you have to say that the task of that general manager is going to be the most difficult of any one of the GMs, because not only he's got He's got Draisaitl and he's got McDavid locked up. That's $21 million on the cap. If the cap goes up, you still have to take care of the guys who are clearly not working there and find a way to get them off of your roster.
Right.
And if there's a guy like McCrimmon who is an astute eye for talent, he can go out and he can draft, and their drafting has not been great past the first round over the last few years. That'll be the key to that team being able to develop over the next 4 or 5 years, is getting talent in the lower rounds. But that's not going to be immediate, and they want immediate help.
I'll give you immediate help for them, right? So I just got an email from the KHL, and there's a big centerman who actually, and you still have to skate fairly well to play in the KHL, who was actually last with the Providence Bruins, had 5 points in 11 games. Eunice Kampanen. And so you look at his numbers and you say he's 31 and he's a centerman. He's 6'3", 225.
Mm-hmm.
And this year he had 33 points in 59 games, 17 goals. And right now in the playoffs, he has 10 goals in 16 games. If I'm Edmonton, I give him a contract.
Right. Edmonton should be out there scouting European free agents, scouting college free agents, looking at every potential avenue to bring in talent, because
No, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to finish because I have to drop off. But honestly, I think the Edmonton situation, no matter they could hire Bill Torrey or the Bill Torrey, the equivalent of Bill Torrey in 2019. It's going to take them a couple years to clear out the dead wood on that roster.
Russ, I mean, how's Koskinen worked out for him signing untested NHL talent from Russia? Like, I mean, like,
and Peter, he's still a 6'3", 225 center. I'll bring him in and see.
Yeah, I'd bring him in as long as the cost is right. Yeah, but I mean, Edmonton will sign him for 3 years.
No.
Oh, let's bring him over. Right? Like, that's the problem.
Yeah.
I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Peter. Thanks, Mike. Interesting thing that Matthew just
hold on, we have breaking news.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So Mike Johnson said on SiriusXM that Fletcher is meeting with Dave Tippett. I did post last night on Twitter that I felt like the Flyers would go after Tippett, but the only problem with Dave Tippett is he's still an advisor for Seattle, so they are going to have to pay him extremely well.
I will tell you something that is fascinating about this discussion. Do we know that this is for coming to Philadelphia or for Fletcher, not for Fletcher going to Seattle? Like,
it's not for Fletcher going to Seattle.
I know that's like a 1% chance, but just hear this. The weird thing about this, and there's a weirdness. The reason I say this is this.
Okay.
Tippett is completely running the show in Seattle. Not just like a little involvement in Seattle. He is interviewing all the GM candidates in Seattle. He is the guy. He is the president of the team essentially right now. Like, this coming from a president of Seattle to coach in Philly, I don't know, but
it shows the level of desperation. I mean, they look at Dave Tippett and know that he's probably the second or third best option out there, so they're going to see if they can pry him away. That's really the intent.
Yeah, I mean, good luck. I mean, why would Tippett do that in a million years? Like, what's the benefit?
Give you a few million reasons why.
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, but he's getting paid pretty well out there too, and
yeah, but Comcast can outbid him if they want to.
I guess. I mean, it's just there's a strange thing going around in Philly too. And the other reason I say is when the game the other night, I was talking to some people on the Final Flyers game, and they were all talking a lot about Fletcher and how Fletcher has literally been absent in Philadelphia this year. Like, really, since he became GM, we've seen him a handful of times in Philly. I mean, you know that, Russ. He's hardly ever there. I talked to a beat writer in Philly who asked me, is Fletcher living in Minnesota? Like, that?
No, he's there. The problem is he does stay in the suite a lot. I see him. I've seen him. I even saw him.
He was there the last few weeks, but before that,
he does go on the road. He and Brent Flair were on the road, going to various college games and other things. They went to go talk to Tanner Lisinski. Yeah. They've actually been doing those kinds of things. That's why.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I get that.
Yeah.
Just a little different than, so like Hextall was usually.
Yeah, and they spoke to Wade Allison too, so people don't get worried.
Yeah, no, that's good. But it's just strange to me that, that's a weird discussion that with Fletcher and Tippett, because Tippett needs a GM and Fletcher needs a coach. So they're talking to each other, Tippett's been talking to nothing but GMs, and,
this is going, this is going exactly the way we thought it would for the Flyers. They tried to get Quenneville, they couldn't. Now they're going to go after Tippett. I'm telling you, eventually they're going to talk to Alain Vigneault, and eventually Scott Gordon could still end up being the coach if one of these guys don't shake loose or somebody else doesn't get fired who they deem is better than Scott Gordon.
The one guy I heard this morning was name mentioned with the Flyers was Desjardins, who just got fired out of LA. I actually like him a lot. I like Willie Desjardins quite a bit. I thought he did well in Vegas. You don't like him, Peter?
I think the best before date with Willie is over, and Willie, I think Willie is a likable guy.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a person who has a coaching skill set. I don't think he's an NHL level head coach. I think I don't know what his decisions in LA were very curious. He sort of coached himself out of a job in Vancouver over time, and he had a great run winning the Calder with the Stars affiliate. He's got a role. He can clearly do something, but I think he's got a finite ceiling, and the NHL is beyond that ceiling.
I think it's tough to say. I mean, both Vancouver and LA situations were both tricky because LA is definitely a team that doesn't have much right now at all. I mean, and LA's got the crazy, situation going on with Doughty and how bad Doughty was this year. People just don't, realize like Doughty was terrible this year, and he's starting a huge contract, right? It's just like LA's a weird spot, right? It's a tough situation for them to be in.
Yeah, they're Edmonton South with none of the talent.
Yeah, no, and they have no speed. And I do think Vigneault is a possibility in Philly. I agree with Russ on that one. But
I think here's the thing with Vigneault.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interviewing Alain Vigneault, you need to find out what it is he's going to do that's going to make things different, because Vigneault was the first coach I ever heard talk about puck possession and its merits, but he didn't do it analytically. He talked about it in the core in the aspect of strategy and tactics underneath. And it was when he first got hired in Vancouver and what he was going to do. So he knew what the roster was, and he ground it down. And that's when Naslund was on the last year of his deal. And he was like, they played a weird puck possession semi-trap game, and that wasn't his game. He left and went and signed with the Rangers, then retired. He didn't want to play that. So Vigneault's had success. He's taken two teams to the Stanley Cup Finals in Vancouver and the Rangers. He's a likable guy. He's decent with the media, and he's got a bit of a hard aspect to him as a coach. The problem is he wears himself out.
He does.
In his places. And so if you're a team and as an organization, you want to move in one direction, you got to understand if what Vigneault is going to do is going to be congruent with the direction you're moving the organization in. If you're bringing in Alain Vigneault to be Alain Vigneault, you can't sort of detach your organization from what he is. You have to make sure you're either with him in support and how you're going to build players in a team and all the other things that go into a hockey team, or you're going to move, he's going to agree to go with that direction and seize the process that you want to do. You can't detach yourself from him because it never ends well.
I'll tell you what he can do. So here's what he would bring for the Flyers instantly. First thing is the way the Flyers veterans played down the stretch. A, he would hold them accountable. B, he would have started to bench guys, which never happened. And it probably should have happened because guys deserved it. That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing is, and this is rightly or wrongly, this is what will happen. That young talent will have to play very responsible at the top of their game, or they're going to not get a lot of ice time. Now, there's two sides to that, but that's the way he does it. That is the way Vigneault does it.
Yeah.
He is an interesting guy because he wants you to play with pace. He wants puck possession, and he does give you ice time based on merit, which right now, if you're a Flyers team that thinks they're rebuilding, don't hire Alain Vigneault. But if you do think you're a Flyers team that's only a couple pieces away, then you need Alain Vigneault. That's really the way it works for him.
Yeah. Well, the Flyers usually don't think they're rebuilding, as you know.
Right.
So that's
true.
I mean, whether or not we can all agree where they are on that level, they personally don't think they're rebuilding. That's never been their motto. Even when they finished dead last, they didn't even see it like that. So I would be surprised. Listen. I mean, I've had my issues with Vigneault in the past, covering him in Stanley Cup Finals and stuff like that, where I've just asked him some questions that I thought I got absolutely ridiculous responses to, and some of the things, and mostly my issue with Vigneault actually was his handling of goaltenders in Vancouver. Like I thought, that was horrendous, and
but in New York, it solved the problem with having Lundqvist, right?
Well, New York, you didn't have to worry about it. In Philly, you got to worry about it again. So it's like,
no, I think he would go with Hart, and really. Hart would have to really be terrible for him to make a decision.
I think with AV, what you would get is you would at least get a plan.
Yes.
With how to manage the goalies. It wouldn't be fly by night. And he's kind of blunt about things. So if he says, if the two let's just say for the sake of argument that what are the two goalies next year in Philly are Hart and who's it going to be?
Talbot.
Say Talbot. Should be Talbot. And he's going to say, and if you're Fletcher, you're like, okay, how are you going to manage Carter Hart's trajectory? What are you going to do? And he's going to say, this is my plan for starts. I'm going to mock it up like this on how the season works, opposition, and he's going to develop a plan, but he'll stick to that plan. He'll absolutely stick to it.
Yeah.
And at least everyone knows what's going on. Like no one had a clue what was going on with the Philly goaltenders this year.
Yeah,
right?
no, nobody did. Actually, and I have a quiz for Eck, because he always likes to quiz me. Now I'm going to quiz him. How many times in the 12 years that Alain Vigneault has coached has he missed the playoffs?
That's a good one. 3?
2.
2, yeah. No, I mean, he's been consistently. He had a good team in Vancouver, and he had a good team in New York, too. He had good teams.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a great team when he took over New York. Like,
No.
I mean, it was good. I mean,
most out of that team.
Yeah, you got most out of Vancouver too. I mean, he had Vancouver winning the President Cup, right? I mean,
he went to the finals, right? The way Rangers went to the finals the first year with Vigneault, but I think that was because it was like the last throes of what Torts had built there, and it was really good. After that, if you go by what the Rangers were doing, it took them 3 more years to get back.
Right.
2 more years to. Well, no. Let's see. They lost. Actually, it was finals round 3, and then they started going downhill. So I'm not sure Vigneault. Really, I mean, other than taking over what Torts had to really build all that much there. With Philly, it'd be different. It'd be more like Vancouver, I think, where they had to sort of build up to it. With the Rangers, they built down to it because they kept everybody.
We know that sometimes, even with Torts in New York, a coach can only get a team so far, and you need someone else to come in. Laviolette's a specialist at getting that team to the next level. Right. He's done it and he'll continue to do it. Vigneault can be that guy too. And in some ways, Torts can be that guy too.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of coaches who are, you just have to know your timing when you come into something. So if remember when Alain Vigneault was hired in Vancouver, right? He was the coach of the Moose when they were in Winnipeg, and they were it was only a minor league town here. And he'd already coached the Canadiens, and he was back in coaching in there. And so he took over a team that totally underperformed, had a new GM with some huge visions with Gillis, and they went hard to the net.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of change and upheaval there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something you need to ask him about is what worked there? What was your foundation? And remember, once he got a hold of the Sedins are going to be, they were great players and they were going to be great, but he took them to the next level. Who on the Flyers do you anchor around that to? Ghost? Couturier?
Yeah, right. Couturier and Giroux, really. I mean, that's
Kovarov, Giroux. So, who's your anchor there? Like, and stuff. I mean, it'd be so interesting if you're going, if Fletcher's going to interview Vigneault, you need to go back to that time when he came into the Canucks and understood, like, a lot of pieces, they weren't working right. And they'd had a year a little long ago. They didn't make the playoffs or whatever it was, or I can't remember how that all fit together. Or they got Luongo after, I can't recall. And what happened there? And you got to find that out and sort of understand, because if that's something you saw where he accelerated in, are you creating the same environment for him to accelerate to succeed in Philadelphia? And that's on the GM to understand.
There's three players Alain Vigneault could bring to the next level if he went there. Travis Konechny would be one, Travis Sanheim would be the other, and Ivan Provorov would be the other.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. All right. Well, we got to get going, but we have to do the tankathon, because tomorrow night, guys, this is all comes into fruition. We're going to find out who gets the first pick overall tomorrow night, which is always a kind of a fun night. And I like the way the NHL does it for teams whose season just ended, because it kind of gives them something else to live for a couple days. Because this, everybody knows this is painful time of year for, if your team's out of the playoffs. Here we go. So we're going to hit it up. And it is the Edmonton Oilers.
Oh, no.
I love it. Oh, man. The Edmonton Oilers with the top pick overall.
I will tell you this. I'll make a prediction. If Colorado gets the third overall pick,
yes, I
will tell you right off the bat, they still made the right decision drafting Tkachuk last year, because he'll be better than anybody you could get third overall in this draft.
The first two, right? The first two, they're the issue.
Yeah.
But even I mean, I honestly think that they did the right thing no matter what, because
I do too.
And just because we're going to have this tomorrow, where's your cutoff line of talent in that first round? Where do you think it drops?
Well, it drops after 2, right? Because those 2 are head and shoulders above the rest.
Right. But then
then I think it goes from like 3 to 8 is the next great pool. I think once you get past 10, you're losing the chance of a franchise player.
Okay. So we've got there's some interesting variables as things at stake then tomorrow night, because I've really only heard about, obviously, Hughes and what's his name? Keiko.
Right. No, there's a lot of other guys. There's Turcotte. There's Byron Bynum, the defenseman. He's going to probably be the first one off the board. He's a terrific offensive defenseman. There's Vasily Podkolzin, the Russian. He's big and he's fast. You got Cole Caulfield, who's got over 50 goals. I mean, I wrote about a few other guys today. There's a load of talent. It's just when you're talking about franchise guys, then I think after 10 is when it's going to wane a little. I mean, Spencer Knight will be the first goalie off the board. He might go in the top 15 picks this year, simply because there's going to be a team that needs a goalie. They're going to look at the rest of the talent. They're going to say, you know what? We might need to get this goalie.
Right. I mean, the defenseman you were talking about, the first defenseman overall, I heard mentioned Byron.
Yeah,
Byron. Doesn't he feel like the perfect fit for Colorado? I mean, if Colorado could get him. I mean, obviously Colorado will have a shot.
He'd be a great fit for them, but depends where they get him. I mean, if they get him, let's say they have the second pick, I wouldn't pick him with the second pick. But here's what he did this year: 71 points in 67 games. Yeah. Playoffs, 10 points in 8 games. I mean, these are great numbers. He is a really great skater. I couldn't kill him if they went with him second, but then you're handing, Capo Keiko to somebody on a silver platter, whoever's third. That's the only problem, because you drafted out of need. You know what I mean?
But to me, you're looking at, you don't want to become the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, they have this have this great line, and they have a chance to get a guy like that. It would be a tough one for me to pass up. I agree with you. I mean, but the good news is for them, for Colorado fans, is you either get Hughes or Keiko or this guy, perhaps, in all.
You're in the playoffs and you're getting somebody like this. You're not drafting below 4th.
Right, and you got at number 4, you have a really good shot at that defenseman in the worst.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, in the worst case, so it's Colorado's looking sweet right now, obviously.
No, it's good for them, man.
So yeah, but if Edmonton gets the first pick, the internet will explode.
Oh, it will explode. I did broach this about a week ago. They were asking me who deserves, to get the first overall pick and everything else. And I think I blew Gord Stellick's mind when I said, well, I think kind of the Rangers do, because they've never had it. And Gord Stellick was once the assistant GM for the Rangers. And he paused and he went on with things. And then he came back and he goes, Russ, you really blew me away with that. I had to go back and look. They've never even had a pick in the top 3 ever in the modern draft era. So, this is something where you look at a team like that who's doing it the right way. Yeah. It would be a just reward for them. And actually, think about it. If they got the first overall pick, the buzz around the league, what would happen?
Yeah, NHL would love that, obviously.
Although I will tell you the opposite side of it. There will be well, there's something going on. There's a conspiracy, like when the Knicks got Patrick Ewing.
They have never had it. I think that would be.
I know.
It would be, but I think if I was to say that, I would love to see him go to Detroit just for the obvious.
Detroit's the other one I said. Yep.
Vancouver would be fantastic for the obvious.
Vancouver's the other one I said. Yep.
And then maybe the other one is honestly Arizona. Like, give Arizona. Arizona needs scoring desperately. They've got a great young team.
Hey, you put Keller and Hughes together. That's pretty dynamic.
It would be exciting in Arizona. That would be a fun. That would be a fun scene.
Yeah.
I think I could really see that being.
It would be as exciting as shuffleboard night in Arizona. It really would.
And of course, the Kings. Of course, it's another one. So the Kings are New York. Both places the NHL would probably love to put Jack Hughes.
Jack Hughes for the Kings. Like, I don't even think the Kings would play around. Like, I don't know what team it's going to take that when they get the first pick, they say, well, we don't know what we're going to do. There's a few teams that will tell you right away what they're going to do, and I think the Kings would be one of them.
Yeah, the Kings will try to get to number one if they're close, right? I mean, that's basically what I've heard too. That they really want to use in the worst way. Anyway, we'll talk more about that tomorrow and start your playoff predictions and stuff like that tomorrow with all a bunch of craziness. I like the first round matchups. The only thing I would say is the excitement. There was a lot of fun in the excitement of the Rangers being ahead of the Penguins for a little while there, and the other day. Yeah. That was a lot of fun in the press box because we're sitting there and I'm sitting there watching the Carolina match. I obviously had Philly, Carolina. Russ and I are there, and suddenly the Rangers, are ahead of the Penguins, which could move the Carolina Hurricanes ahead of the Penguins. And then the Penguins, like every fan who hates the Pittsburgh Penguins will tell you. I had so many people texting me. It's like those friggin' Penguins. They're going to get
what they do.
They get one lousy point out of the Rangers at a home game that that's all they needed was one stupid point.
Yep.
To get the Islanders, a team that a lot of people think that they could take out, versus having to go against the Capitals where they would have gotten destroyed. But I will tell you this: this Penguins team, I am not heavy on this Penguins team at all. This is not a good Penguins team. This just isn't a good Penguins team in my mind.
Yep. I think Isles will upset, but the upset you got to watch out for, and then I got to run because I got to go to an appointment.
Go for it.
I wrote this for Todd Cordell in the hot stove today. Watch out for the Avalanche against the Flames. There's my dark horse pick.
I picked the Avs too. I did.
They've been very, very good. They've been very, very good. I've got one tomorrow.
Take care, guys. Got to run.
All right.
I got one tomorrow. Russ knows about that. We'll talk about that. I think is just is my stone cold lock for the first round. We'll talk about that then.
Yep.
Without the buzz, guys, it's just hockey. We will talk to you then.